In the grand scheme of the universe, humans weren't supposed to matter. We were that annoying little planet in the unfashionable western spiral arm of the galaxy that nobody invited to the cosmic party. At least that's what the collective alien races thought until we somehow managed to fend off not one, but three separate invasion attempts with nothing but outdated military hardware, excessive amounts of caffeine, and what alien anthropologists would later classify as humanity's disturbing tendency to weaponize absolutely anything. The Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided that perhaps extermination wasn't the best approach to dealing with the peculiar ape descendants of Earth. Instead, they established the Intergalactic Peacekeeping Force, a bureaucratic nightmare disguised as a diplomatic initiative, which was really just their way of keeping an eye on us while pretending to be our friends. Enter Lieutenant Commander Jack Reynolds, a man whose military career had been so spectacularly unimpressive that when the brass needed someone to babysit an alien diplomat, his name rose to the top of the list like unwanted froth on a badly poured beer. "Congratulations, Reynolds," Admiral Garcia had said, not bothering to look up from her quantum tablet. "You've been selected to host Commander Krell'Vox of the Zentari Empire for his Earth tour." Jack's face had contorted into what his friends called his stepped-in-something unpleasant expression. The Zentari? Weren't they the ones who tried to melt our polar ice caps just last year? Water under the bridge, Garcia waved dismissively. Or rather, water that remained frozen thanks to our missile defense systems. Now they're our allies, and you're going to make sure Commander Krell'Vox gets the full Earth experience without causing an interstellar incident. "Why me?" Jack had asked, knowing the answer but hoping for a miracle. "Because everyone else suddenly remembered urgent dental appointments on Alpha Centauri," Garcia had replied, finally looking up with a smirk. "And because your personnel file says you're pathologically diplomatic, which I'm pretty sure was meant as an insult. But here we are." And so it came to be that Jack Reynolds stood at the Intergalactic Spaceport, formerly known as O'Hare International Airport, watching the sleek Zentari shuttle descend with all the enthusiasm of a man awaiting a root canal. The shuttle landed with a precision that made Earth's finest pilots look like children throwing paper airplanes. The door hissed open, releasing a puff of alien atmosphere that smelled vaguely like cinnamon and motor oil. Commander Krell'Vox emerged, all 7 feet of blue-scaled arrogance wrapped in an elaborate uniform adorned with medals and a ceremonial sash that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. The Zentari had 4 arms, which Jack had always thought was cosmically unfair. Humans could barely manage with 2. "Lieutenant Commander Reynolds," Krell'Vox said, his translator converting the series of clicks and whistles into a voice that somehow managed to sound condescending in any language. "I am pleased to meet my human liaison." The pause before pleased stretched just long enough to make it clear he was anything but. "Welcome to Earth, Commander," Jack replied with his best diplomat smile, the one that showed teeth but not too many, lest it be interpreted as aggression by certain species. "We're honored to host you as part of the peacekeeping initiative." Krell'Vox's upper right eye, he had 3, arranged in a triangle pattern, twitched slightly. Yes, the initiative. A charming concept. Teaching primitive species the proper way to behave in galactic society. And there it was. Not even 5 minutes in, and the alien had already managed to insult the entire human race. Jack maintained his smile by imagining he was actually baring his teeth as a warning. "Our accommodations are prepared for your physiological needs," Jack said, steering the conversation away from humanity's supposed primitiveness. "And I've been tasked with giving you a comprehensive tour of our culture and civilization." "I have studied your civilization extensively," Krell'Vox said, making air quotes with his lower set of arms while his upper arms remained formally clasped behind his back. "I am particularly interested in understanding how a species that still uses combustion engines managed to repel 3 galactic military campaigns." Jack picked up the slip immediately. So Krell'Vox had been personally involved in the invasion attempts. Wonderful. This was going to be the longest peacekeeping tour in Earth's short intergalactic history. "I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to discuss human innovation," Jack said, leading the commander toward the diplomatic hover car. "Our first stop is City Hall, where the mayor is waiting to present you with the ceremonial key to the city." "A key? Krell'Vox's head tilted in confusion. Your security systems are so primitive they still use physical keys? Jack sighed internally. It was going to be a very long tour indeed. By day 3 of what Jack had begun mentally referring to as the diplomatic tour from hell, he had developed an eye twitch to match Krell'Vox's. They had visited monuments, museums, and manufacturing plants. They had attended concerts, sporting events, and a particularly disastrous cooking show where Krell'Vox had informed the celebrity chef that his award-winning souffle resembled the ceremonial death paste of the Zlorg, which was apparently not a compliment. "Where are we going today, Lieutenant Commander?" Krell'Vox asked as he folded himself into the hover car, his forearms arranging themselves with practiced precision to avoid touching any surface more than necessary. "Downtown," Jack replied, trying to sound enthusiastic. "We're going to see the new planetary Unity Plaza, where children from around the world come to learn about Earth's place in the galactic community." Krell'Vox's facial scales rippled in what Jack had come to recognize as the alien equivalent of an eye roll. "Ah, yes, indoctrinating your larvae with false notions of equality among species. How quaint." Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter. "They're called children, not larvae. And teaching them about other cultures is hardly indoctrination." "Semantics." Krell'Vox waved a dismissive lower hand. "Your species is still in its infancy. The Zentari had already colonized 3 solar systems by the time your ancestors figured out that rubbing sticks together produces fire. And yet we managed to stop your warships with what you called, and I quote, laughably obsolete projectile weapons," Jack muttered under his breath. "What was that?" "I said we're almost at our destination," Jack lied smoothly. The planetary Unity Plaza was a marvel of post-first contact architecture, blending traditional human design with alien influences. The central dome was modeled after the Great Council Chamber on Alpha Centauri, while the surrounding gardens featured plants from a dozen different worlds that had been successfully adapted to Earth's environment. As they walked through the main entrance, Jack noticed a group of elementary school children gathered around a holographic display of the Milky Way. Their teacher, a young woman with endless patience written on her face, was trying to corral them into an orderly line. "Ah, human offspring in their natural state of chaos," Krell'Vox observed loudly enough for several parents to turn and stare. Jack forced a laugh. "Kids will be kids, Commander. It's all part of their development. On Zentari Prime, offspring are contained in education pods until they have mastered basic molecular physics and proper decorum," Krell'Vox said. "It produces far more efficient adults." "That's nice," Jack replied, mentally adding child-rearing practices to the list of topics to avoid with the commander. They continued through the plaza, with Jack pointing out exhibits about Earth's first tentative steps into the galactic community. Krell'Vox seemed particularly amused by the display on human space exploration, chuckling at the primitive designs of early spacecraft. "You sent humans into the void in these?" he asked, pointing at a model of the International Space Station. "It's a wonder your species survived long enough to meet us." Before Jack could formulate a diplomatic response, he heard a high-pitched voice from behind them. "Are you a real alien?" Jack turned to see a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, staring up at Krell'Vox with wide-eyed wonder. The child had broken away from his school group and approached the Zentari commander with the fearlessness that only human children seem to possess. "Tommy," the teacher called, rushing over. "I'm so sorry," she said to Jack. "He's very curious." "Curiosity is a defect that should be corrected early," Krell'Vox stated. "But yes, small human, I am what you would classify as a real alien. I am Commander Krell'Vox of the Zentari Empire, 3rd-rank military strategist, and now," he sighed deeply, cultural exchange officer. Tommy's eyes grew even wider. "Do you have superpowers? Can you shoot lasers from your eyes?" "Tommy," the teacher said, "that's not inappropriate." "I possess no superpowers," Krell'Vox interrupted. "The Zentari are simply evolutionarily superior to humans in every measurable way. My exoskeletal plates can withstand temperatures that would melt human flesh. My third eye can perceive ultraviolet light, and my brain can process complex quantum calculations without mechanical assistance." "Cool," Tommy exclaimed. "Why do you have 4 arms? Is it hard to buy shirts?" Jack suppressed a snort of laughter as Krell'Vox's scales flushed a deeper blue in what he recognized as the alien version of embarrassment. "My 4 upper appendages allow for superior manipulation of tools and weapons," Krell'Vox replied stiffly. "And my garments are molecularly assembled to my specific physiological requirements." "Can I touch your scales?" Tommy asked, already reaching out a small hand. "Tommy," the teacher gasped, "we don't touch people without permission." But Tommy's curiosity had already propelled his hand forward toward the shimmering ceremonial sash that hung across Krell'Vox's chest, the same sash that, as Jack suddenly remembered from his cultural briefing, was the sacred symbol of Zentari military achievement, bestowed by the Supreme Overlord himself, and absolutely positively never to be touched by anyone of lesser rank, let alone an alien species. Jack lunged forward, but he was too late. Time seemed to slow down as Tommy's small fingers made contact with the shimmering fabric of Krell'Vox's ceremonial sash. Jack could have sworn he heard the dramatic string section of a movie soundtrack swell in the background, but though that was probably just the blood rushing in his ears as he anticipated diplomatic catastrophe. What happened next would be replayed on news feeds across the galaxy, analyzed by alien cultural experts, and eventually turned into an educational holodrama titled When Tentacles and Handshakes Collide, a guide to interspecies physical boundaries. Krell'Vox's reaction was instantaneous and, unfortunately, instinctive. One of his lower arms shot out faster than Jack could track, the palm connecting with Tommy's cheek with a crack that seemed to echo throughout the entire plaza. The force of the slap calibrated for Zentari physiology, not the significantly more fragile human child, sent Tommy stumbling backward, eyes wide with shock before his face crumpled and he began to wail. The plaza fell silent for precisely 2.3 seconds before erupting into chaos. "He hit my child," Tommy's teacher shouted, rushing to gather the sobbing boy into her arms. Parents pulled their children back, some reaching for their communication devices to record the incident, others already punching in emergency numbers. Security guards moved toward them with hands hovering over their non-lethal restraint devices. Jack stepped between Krell'Vox and the growing mob, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of everyone calm the hell down before we start an interplanetary war. "It's a cultural misunderstanding," Jack announced loudly, his crisis management training kicking in. "Please, everyone, stay calm. Medical assistance is on the way for the child." Behind him, Krell'Vox was staring at his own hand, as if it had betrayed him. "The offspring touched the sacred sash of honor," he said, his translator struggling to convey the appropriate level of horror in his voice. "On Zentari Prime, such an offense would result in immediate disintegration." "We're not on Zentari Prime," Jack hissed through clenched teeth. "And on Earth, hitting children results in something we call jail time, followed by something even worse called litigation." Tommy continued to sob dramatically, his cheek bearing the distinct blue-tinged imprint of a 4-fingered Zentari hand. The teacher was now on her phone, presumably calling both the boy's parents and her lawyer, in that order. Jack tapped his official peacekeeping force communicator, speaking rapidly. "Code Violet at Planetary Unity Plaza. Diplomatic intervention needed immediately. Send medical PR team, and for the love of God, someone from legal." He turned back to Krell'Vox, whose scales had paled to a sickly grayish blue. "Commander, I need you to issue an immediate apology." "Apologize? To an offspring? For defending my sacred honor?" Krell'Vox's 3 eyes blinked in asynchronous confusion. "Perhaps your translation device is malfunctioning." "My translation device is working perfectly," Jack replied, fighting to keep his voice level. "What's malfunctioning is your understanding of the situation. You just physically assaulted a human child in public. There are at least 50 people recording this incident right now, and it's probably already hitting the global networks." As if on cue, Jack's communicator buzzed with an incoming message from Admiral Garcia. "What the hell is happening?" "The slap is trending planet-wide. The juvenile's physical integrity appears mostly intact," Krell'Vox observed, peering at the still crying Tommy. On my world, offspring regularly survive much worse during standard education exercises. This isn't a surviving issue. It's a you committed a crime issue, Jack explained, feeling a headache blooming behind his eyes. Physical discipline of children is illegal in this region, and assault is a universal offense. Krell'Vox's head tilted in that peculiar angle that indicated he was processing unfamiliar information. Your laws protect even your weakest members from necessary correction? How inefficient. Before Jack could respond to this particularly tone-deaf observation, the plaza's doors burst open as medical personnel rushed in, followed closely by a swarm of journalists who had materialized with the supernatural speed that media always seemed to possess when scandal was in the air. Is it true that the Zentari commander attacked a human child? Was this an isolated incident or part of a pattern of alien aggression? Does this represent the breakdown of the peacekeeping initiative? Commander Krell'Vox, do you have a statement about the assault? The questions came rapid fire as hovering cameras zoomed in on Krell'Vox's face, capturing his expression of confused indignation for posterity and what would soon become an interstellar meme. Jack stepped in front of the cameras, summoning his most authoritative voice. This was an unfortunate cultural misunderstanding that is being addressed through proper diplomatic channels. The child is receiving medical attention, and Commander Krell'Vox is fully cooperating with authorities. The Intergalactic Peacekeeping Force will issue a formal statement shortly. No further questions at this time. He grabbed Krell'Vox by one of his upper arms and steered him toward the exit where, thankfully, a Peacekeeping Force security detail had arrived to escort them to safety. As they hurried toward the waiting vehicle, Jack heard Tommy's distinctive voice rise above the commotion. "Mom's gonna sue you guys for like $1 bazillion. And I'm gonna be on TV." Jack closed his eyes briefly. The kid was going to be fine. His spirit, at least, was clearly unbroken. His diplomatic career, on the other hand, was circling the drain of galactic history. "I do not understand the human response," Krell'Vox said as they settled into the secure vehicle. "The offspring violated a sacred taboo. The correction was minimal." Jack stared at the alien for a long moment before responding. "Commander, let me explain something about humans that you might have missed in your research. We are extremely protective of our young. Throughout our history, the fastest way to unite humans against a common enemy has been to threaten our children. You just became that common enemy." For the first time since his arrival, Krell'Vox was silent, his three eyes blinking in an unsynchronized pattern that Jack recognized as the Zentari equivalent of processing disturbing news. The diplomatic incident counter in Jack's head, which had been steadily ticking upward during the entire tour, had just exploded off the scale. Jack had expected the news to spread quickly, but he'd underestimated the sheer velocity of human outrage amplified by social media. By the time they reached the secure compound of the Peacekeeping Force headquarters, Alien Child Slapper was trending globally, accompanied by a slowed-down, dramatic rendering of the slap set to emotional music. Admiral Garcia was waiting for them, and her face set in an expression that suggested she was calculating the exact amount of paperwork required to court-martial Jack back to the Stone Age. Reynolds, she greeted him with glacial calm. "When I said show the Commander Earth culture, I didn't mean create an interstellar incident that threatens the entire peacekeeping initiative." "In my defense, Admiral," Jack began, but Garcia held up a hand. "Save it. The situation has escalated beyond anything we could have anticipated. The Zentari High Command has issued a statement defending Commander Krell'Vox's actions as culturally appropriate discipline of an undisciplined human larva." Krell'Vox's posture straightened with vindication. "As I have been attempting to explain to Lieutenant Commander Reynolds." "That's not helping," Garcia cut him off. "Meanwhile, Earth's United Nations has convened an emergency session. 17 countries have recalled their ambassadors from Zentari Prime, and—" She checked her tablet, wincing. Tommy's mother is giving a tearful interview on Global News Network demanding justice for her sweet, innocent boy who just wanted to learn about aliens. Jack glanced at the monitor on the wall where Tommy's mother was indeed describing her son as an angelic creature who had never caused trouble in his life. An assessment that Jack suspected was generous based on his brief encounter with the boy. The Zentari Empire does not respond to emotional manipulation, Krell'Vox declared, his scales bristling with indignation. The offspring committed a grave violation of sacred protocol. The offspring is 7 years old and had no idea what your sash represents, Jack retorted. On Earth, we generally don't hold children accountable for not knowing alien cultural taboos they've never been taught. Perhaps if you contained your young in proper educational facilities. Enough. Garcia's voice cut through their bickering. Commander Krell'Vox, while on Earth you are subject to Earth's laws and conventions. And those laws are very clear about striking children. Krell'Vox's 3 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of mounting frustration. Admiral, surely you understand the diplomatic implications here. I am a representative of the Zentari Empire. I cannot be subject to human justice systems without creating a precedent that would undermine our sovereignty. Garcia's smile was thin and dangerous. Interesting point, Commander. Let me share some context with you. In the 3 hours since the slap, my office has received communication from 17 different alien species, all expressing concern about Zentari behavior. The Arcturians have gone so far as to suggest that perhaps humans should be invited to join the Galactic Security Council as a stabilizing influence. Jack couldn't help but whistle. The Galactic Security Council was the elite group that essentially governed interstellar relations. Humans had been trying to get a seat at that table since first contact. That is outrageous. Krell'Vox sputtered, all 4 hands gesticulating wildly. Humans are barely space-capable. They still use fossil fuels. They watch reality television. And yet, Garcia continued smoothly, they've managed to turn your cultural misstep into a diplomatic opportunity that could reshape galactic politics. It seems that many species share humans' distaste for child slapping, even if they don't have the same biological attachment to their young. Jack watched as the implications of this statement slowly penetrated Krell'Vox's understanding. The commander's posture shifted subtly, his scales settling into a pattern that suggested calculation rather than outrage. What does the peacekeeping force propose as a solution? Krell'Vox finally asked, his tone carefully neutral. Garcia nodded to Jack. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds has been authorized to negotiate terms that would satisfy human justice while respecting Zentari dignity. Jack tried not to show his surprise. This was the first he'd heard of any such authorization, but he wasn't about to contradict his superior officer in front of Krell'Vox. The situation requires a proportional response, Jack said, thinking quickly. Commander Krell'Vox must acknowledge the cultural violation from a human perspective, make appropriate restitution, and demonstrate a commitment to preventing similar incidents. What form would this restitution take? Krell'Vox asked cautiously. Jack exchanged a look with Garcia, who gave him the smallest of nods. Commander, how familiar are you with the human concept of community service? As Jack outlined the proposed solution, Krell'Vox's scales cycled through various shades of blue, purple, and at one point, a mottled green that Jack hadn't seen before. Meanwhile, the monitors continued to display footage of the slap from various angles, and with commentators from around the world and beyond offering increasingly dramatic interpretations of the event's significance. On one screen, a Regelian diplomat was solemnly declaring, "This incident reveals the fundamental incompatibility of Zentari military culture with civilized galactic norms." While on another, a human child psychologist explained the potential long-term trauma Tommy might experience from an encounter with alien physical discipline paradigms. Jack noticed that the footage of Tommy himself, now being interviewed from his hospital bed, despite having nothing more serious than a bruise, showed the boy enthusiastically reenacting the slap for the cameras while describing how totally awesome. It was to be the first human kid ever slapped by an alien. Tommy's newfound celebrity status seemed to have thoroughly eclipsed any actual trauma. "This is unprecedented," Krell'Vox finally said after Jack had finished explaining the proposed resolution. "No Zentari official has ever been subjected to another species' justice system." "Consider it a historic opportunity," Jack suggested. "The first step toward true intergalactic cultural understanding." Krell'Vox's upper right eye twitched violently. "And if I refuse?" Admiral Garcia stepped forward. Then we cannot protect you from the consequences. Earth's governments are united on this issue. The Galactic Council is watching closely, and public opinion has already convicted you in the court of social media, without a formal resolution. This incident could permanently damage not just Zentari human relations, but your empires standing throughout the galaxy. A long silence filled the room as Krell'Vox processed this information, his three eyes blinking in an uncoordinated pattern that suggested intense internal calculation. Very well, he finally said, his voice translator unable to fully mask the resignation in his tone. I will submit to this community service and sensitivity training. But I want it recorded that I do so under protest and solely for the greater diplomatic good. Jack exhaled slowly, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. Wise decision, Commander. We'll begin arrangements immediately. As they left the conference room, Krell'Vox leaned closer to Jack and said quietly, Your species is far more strategically cunning than our intelligence suggested. Perhaps the invasion failures were not merely due to luck after all. Jack couldn't help but smile. We have a saying on Earth, Commander. Don't mess with the cubs if you can't handle the bear. If there was one thing humans excelled at beyond all other species in the known galaxy, it was bureaucracy. Long before they had mastered faster-than-light travel or quantum communications, humans had perfected the art of making people fill out forms in triplicate, sit through mind-numbing presentations, and engage in sharing circles that left even the most hardened military commanders questioning their life choices. Commander Krell'Vox of the mighty Zentari Empire was about to experience this uniquely human form of punishment firsthand. This is your schedule for the next 7 Earth days, Jack explained, handing the alien a tablet displaying a color-coded calendar so tightly packed with activities that it resembled a game of Tetris designed by a sadist. Krell'Vox scanned the document, his three eyes widening progressively. What is cultural sensitivity and you? A journey to understanding? That's your morning session, Jack replied cheerfully. 4 hours of interactive workshops on respecting cultural differences, led by Dr. Patrice Mbeki, Earth's leading expert on interspecies communication ethics. 4 hours? Krell'Vox's scales rippled with distress. Zentari military briefings on planetary conquest require only 30 minutes. This isn't a military briefing, Commander. It's sensitivity training. The point is to make you uncomfortable, to help you grow as a person, or whatever the Zentari equivalent of a person is. Krell'Vox continued reading. Lunch with Tommy and family? I am expected to consume nutrients with the offspring I disciplined? Corrected, Jack said, mimicking Krell'Vox's earlier terminology. And yes, breaking bread with someone is a human reconciliation tradition dating back thousands of years. Public apology press conference? Krell'Vox's voice had risen nearly an octave. This is humiliation, not justice. Jack tried not to enjoy the alien's distress quite so much. Actually, public accountability is a cornerstone of human justice systems. The apology will be broadcast throughout Earth and to all Galactic Council member worlds. And what is this? Volunteer work at Children's Hospital. I am to be surrounded by human larvae in a medical facility? You'll be reading stories to sick children, Jack confirmed. Wearing this, he held up what could only be described as a costume of plush, cartoonish alien outfit in bright purple with a friendly, smiling face. Krell'Vox stared at the costume in horror, all three eyes focused on the abomination for perhaps the first time since his arrival. This violates the Geneva Convention. Actually, the Geneva Convention doesn't cover alien diplomats, Jack replied. We checked. So, the following days unfolded exactly as Jack had anticipated, with maximum discomfort for Krell'Vox and, if he was being honest, the maximum entertainment value for himself and the rest of the peacekeeping force staff. The sensitivity training sessions were particularly illuminating. Dr. Mbeki had designed exercises specifically tailored to challenge Zentari cultural assumptions, but including one particularly inspired activity where Krell'Vox had to role-play as a human child while another participant played an overbearing Zentari commander. How does it feel when someone much larger than you exerts their authority without explanation? Dr. Mabeki had asked afterward. Efficient, Krell'Vox had replied stubbornly, but Jack had noticed a slight shift in the alien's posture, a thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. The lunch with Tommy and his family had been awkward but surprisingly productive. Tommy, it turned out, was far more interested in Krell'Vox's cool alien stuff than in holding a grudge. He peppered the commander with questions about Zentari spaceships, warfare tactics, and whether they had anything like video games on their planet. "We have combat simulations for training purposes," Krell'Vox had admitted, gradually warming to the child's genuine interest. "They are not meant to be fun." "That's dumb," Tommy had declared with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Games are supposed to be fun. Otherwise, what's the point?" The question had clearly perplexed Krell'Vox, who had spent the remainder of the meal in contemplative silence. The public apology had been a masterclass in diplomatic wordsmithing. Jack had worked with Krell'Vox for hours to craft a statement that would satisfy human demands for contrition without completely humiliating the Zentari Empire. The result was a carefully balanced acknowledgement that cultural differences do not excuse actions that cause harm under local standards of conduct and a commitment to greater understanding between our species. What had surprised Jack most was the volunteer work at the children's hospital. He had expected Krell'Vox to endure it with gritted teeth, or whatever Zentari had instead of teeth. Instead, after the initial shock of donning the purple alien costume, "This looks nothing like any species in the known galaxy," Krell'Vox had complained, something unexpected happened. The sick children, many of whom had never seen a real alien before, were enchanted by Krell'Vox. They didn't care about diplomatic incidents or cultural taboos. They just thought his multiple arms were awesome and his 3 eyes totally rad. One little girl had asked if she could touch his scales, and after a moment's hesitation, Krell'Vox had extended one arm for her to examine. "They're pretty," she had said simply, and Jack could have sworn he saw Krell'Vox's scales flush with something that might have been pleasure. By the end of the week, news outlets across Earth were running stories with headlines like "Alien Commander Makes Amends and From Slap to Service," a galactic lesson in reconciliation. The Galactic Council had issued a formal statement praising the mature and measured human response to a potentially volatile situation, and Admiral Garcia had informed Jack that his career trajectory had suddenly reversed course from hopelessly stalled to cautiously promising. "The human approach to conflict resolution is unexpected," Krell'Vox admitted on their final day of mandated activities. They were sitting in a park watching children play at a safe distance. Krell'Vox had developed a healthy respect for unpredictable human offspring. On Zentari Prime, such an offense would have resulted in immediate military escalation. "And how would that have ended?" Jack asked. Krell'Vox considered this. "Based on our previous attempts at military action against Earth, poorly." Jack laughed. "So maybe our way isn't so inefficient after all?" "Perhaps," Krell'Vox conceded, "though your bureaucratic punishment methods are fiendishly effective. I would almost prefer traditional combat." "That's the secret weapon of humanity," Jack said with a grin. "We won't kill you. We'll make you fill out forms until you wish you were dead." 6 months after the slap heard round the universe, Jack found himself in the unexpected position of attending a ceremony at Galactic Council headquarters. Watching as Earth was formally granted observer status, the first step toward full membership. Admiral Garcia stood beside him, looking suspiciously like she might be experiencing an emotion. "Did you ever think pushing paper at the peacekeeping force would lead to this?" she asked quietly. "Never in a million years," Jack admitted. "I was just trying to prevent interstellar war. Sometimes preventing the worst outcome creates space for the best one," Garcia replied philosophically, before adding, "Though if you ever tell anyone I said something that's sentimental, I'll have you reassigned to the methane atmosphere diplomatic section." The ceremony was being broadcast across Earth and to all Galactic Council member worlds. Tommy and his family had been invited as honored guests, and the boy was soaking up his continued celebrity status with undisguised glee. He had parlayed his 15 minutes of fame into a successful video channel where he reviewed alien consumer products for human audiences. Most surprising of all was the presence of Commander Krell'Vox. now promoted to Cultural Exchange Director for the Zentari Empire. The slap incident, rather than ending his career, had transformed him into the galaxy's leading expert on human-alien relations. His recent book, The Primitive Wisdom of Earth, What the Galaxy Can Learn from Human Conflict Resolution, had become a bestseller on 17 planets. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds, Krell'Vox greeted Jack formally, extending all four arms in the human-adapted Zentari gesture of respect that he had developed. "It is agreeable to see you again." "Likewise, Director Krell'Vox," Jack replied, still finding it strange to see the once haughty Zentari commander looking almost comfortable in human surroundings. "Your new position seems to suit you." Indeed. The Supreme Overlord was most impressed by my innovative diplomatic approach to the incident. Apparently, the concept of community service as an alternative to military action has revolutionized our foreign policy. We have reduced our conquest budget by 30%. Jack tried not to laugh. "Well, I'm glad something good came out of it." "Many good things," Krell'Vox corrected. "The cultural exchange programs between our worlds have been most productive. And I understand the human phrase, 'don't pull a Krell'Vox,' has entered your global lexicon." "Ah, you heard about that?" Jack winced. "It's meant affectionately. Sort of." "No offense is taken," Krell'Vox assured him. "On Zentari Prime, having one's name become part of the language is considered the highest honor," Krell'Vox continued. "Although perhaps not when it references one's greatest diplomatic blunder." Jack smiled. "I wouldn't call it your greatest blunder anymore. More like your most fortunate mistake." They both turned to watch as Tommy, now sporting a custom-made jacket emblazoned with patches from 17 different alien worlds, approached them with the confidence of a child who had discovered his superpower was being utterly fearless around extraterrestrials. "Hey, Commander Blue Hands." Tommy greeted Krell'Vox with the nickname he'd given him during their hospital reading sessions. "Did you bring me any cool alien stuff for my next review video?" Krell'Vox reached into a pouch with one of his lower arms and produced what looked like a small crystalline cube. "This is a Zentari puzzle box. It contains 27-dimensional challenges and is considered moderately difficult for our juvenile training programs." "Sweet." Tommy grabbed it, immediately turning it over in his hands. To everyone's surprise, the cube emitted a soft chime and its surfaces began to glow. "Impressive," Krell'Vox said, all three eyes widening. "Most Zentari offspring require at least 3 days to activate the first response mechanism." "I just do what feels right," Tommy shrugged, already absorbed in manipulating the puzzle. The Galactic Council President, a tall, willowy being from the Andromeda Galaxy, approached their small group. "This child is the one from the incident?" "Yes, Madam President," Jack confirmed with a respectful nod. "Remarkable," she said, studying Tommy with her luminescent eyes. "Our cultural analysts have been reviewing the entire sequence of events. Do you know what they concluded?" Jack and Krell'Vox both shook their heads. "That humans possess a quality we had not previously categorized in any sentient species, the ability to transform conflict into connection. Where other species seek victory or vengeance, humans seek understanding. It is most unexpected in such a young species." "We have our moments," Jack said modestly. "Indeed. Though I understand you also invented reality television, so perhaps it balances out," the president added with what might have been a smile. As she moved away to greet other dignitaries, Jack turned back to Krell'Vox. "So what's next for the famous cultural exchange director?" "I have been assigned to establish a permanent cultural mission on Earth," Krell'Vox revealed. "And I specifically requested you as my human liaison." Jack nearly choked. "Me? After everything that happened?" "Precisely because of everything that happened," Krell'Vox said. "You taught me that understanding cannot be achieved through study alone. It requires experience, even uncomfortable ones. Perhaps especially uncomfortable ones." Before Jack could respond, Admiral Garcia approached, her expression professionally neutral, but with a glint of amusement in her eyes. "Lieutenant Commander Reynolds, congratulations on your promotion." "My what?" "Memory." "Commander Reynolds," she corrected herself. "Effective immediately." The peacekeeping force is expanding its cultural exchange division, and you're heading it up. Director Krell'Vox specifically requested you. Jack looked between the Admiral and the alien, suddenly suspicious. You two planned this. Strategic alliance, Garcia said with a slight shrug. The Zentari are excellent at long-term planning. And humans are excellent at turning disasters into opportunities, Krell'Vox added. It seemed a logical collaboration. Tommy looked up from his puzzle cube, which had now reconfigured itself into a complex geometric shape. Does this mean more aliens are coming to Earth? Because my channel needs fresh content. Yes, Tommy, Jack sighed. More aliens are coming. Cool. Just tell them not to slap any more kids or they'll have to wear the purple costume too. The boy grinned and wandered off to show his puzzle to a fascinated group of diplomatic attaches. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Jack found himself standing on an observation deck overlooking the swirling majesty of the galactic core. Krell'Vox joined him, standing in companionable silence for a moment. I have been studying human idioms, the Zentari finally said. There is one that I believe applies to our situation. Every cloud has a silver lining. Jack nodded. That's pretty accurate. Although scientifically inaccurate clouds do not contain silver, I appreciate the metaphorical wisdom, Krell'Vox continued. The slap, as unfortunate as it was, ultimately led to greater understanding between our species. And all it took was a diplomatic disaster, a media frenzy, and you in a purple alien costume, Jack replied with a grin. A small price to pay for galactic harmony, Krell'Vox said, and Jack could have sworn the alien's voice contained something that sounded suspiciously like humor. As they looked out at the stars, Jack couldn't help but feel that humanity's place in the universe had somehow been secured not by military might or technological achievement, but by a child's curiosity, a bureaucratic punishment system, and the universal truth that sometimes the most profound understanding comes from our most embarrassing mistakes. By the way, Jack said casually, Tommy's mother just signed a deal for a book called The Slap That United the Galaxy. It's being translated into 47 alien languages. Krell'Vox's scales rippled in what Jack now recognized as resignation. Perhaps in my next book I shall explore another uniquely human concept. What's that? The concept of never living something down. Jack laughed and raised his glass in a toast. To cultural misunderstandings, may we always learn more from them than we lose. Krell'Vox raised all four of his arms in agreement. And to humanity, the only species in the galaxy that would respond to being slapped by making the offender read bedtime stories to small children while dressed as a purple monster. That's us, Jack agreed proudly. The galaxy's not ready for human justice. In diplomatic circles across the universe, the incident would be studied for generations as the textbook example of how not to conduct a first cultural exchange, and simultaneously, as the perfect example of how to turn a disaster into a triumph. Species who had never taken humans seriously began to regard them with new respect and more than a little weariness. After all, any civilization that could transform an interstellar incident into a public relations victory without firing a single shot was clearly not to be underestimated. And somewhere in the galaxy, whenever a diplomatic representative made a cultural faux pas, someone would inevitably whisper, "Don't pull a Krell'Vox." Which, as the Zentari himself had come to appreciate, was probably good advice.